All right. So hello. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. I
Um,
appreciate it.
we have been talking about your book for the last hour, and everybody has such amazingly wonderful things to say.
That's good.
This book has really just, I know for me, it's number one, exactly what I needed at this moment. Um, and it seems like that has been sort of the general consensus. You have a lot of fans.
Well, good. That's awesome to hear. I appreciate that. It's definitely, I know I know how this book has felt for me, getting to see the response I've gotten from readers for the past 2 years since it's been out. And it's been life affirming and humbling and kind of scary at times too, because you have expectations for a book, you hope it does for the best, and then things like the pandemic happen right when your book comes out. And you kind of have to, yeah, because this book came out March 17th of 2020. That was the week
Oh
the
my
pandemic,
God.
yeah, that was the
Yeah.
week the pandemic exploded in the United States. So there I was, while everybody was going to the store to buy toilet paper for reasons I still don't understand. And I was sitting there going, hey, I have this book. It's about kindness and the Antichrist. If you want to read it, it's cool. I know things are super scary right now, and you're all washing your hands, even though you should have been doing that in the first place. But okay, it's totally good. Let's stay healthy. But then it spread for some good reason unknown to me. It just spread. People kept talking about it, and more, and then it found its home.
It's incredible. I mean, I just in my poking around on the internet, I don't know, Twitter stalking, whatever. Yeah, you've got quite the following. There are people that really, really have very, very strong feelings about this book, and now I see why.
I have, look, this was my 25th book when
Okay,
it
we have
came
to
out.
talk about that too.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. But I for a decade I have been I was in the indie publishing scene, and that's where I got my start in 2011. And then I decided one day to 5 years in to quit my job to write full time, and then still going strong all these years later. But about 2 years into that, I felt like I was plateaued. I felt like I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't reaching my potential. So I wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea. And that was a story that came out of that, of me wanting to try something different. And I got an agent because of it. And then the rest, as they say, is history.
That's amazing. I mean, it's interesting that that's what came out. This is what came out for you, because I feel like in a lot of ways, this book is a little bit about a leap of faith and, sort of trusting that gut and that, okay, well, I'm just gonna go for it.
Right. Because this book isn't like my other books. This book, my other books before this were decidedly more adult in content. And with this book, I just, I going into it, I didn't know what the future was going to bring. All I thought was I was just going to write this happy story about acceptance and being nice to people. And, it just so happened to involve these 6 magical children. But I wouldn't know, I had no idea, and I could not know where the world would be by the time that this book came out. And so, I think a lot about that. I don't necessarily believe in the idea of fate or destiny, kismet, anything like that. Frankly, what I think it boils down to, it's some kind of weird, terrible, good luck kind of thing that this book came out when it did, because it was a healing point, or not even a healing point, at least an escape for a lot of people, when a time when escape seemed impossible, because we were all trapped in our homes, and we were all crawling out of our minds. Luckily for me, I'm always trapped in my home, so I was totally fine with that. But the biggest thing that I've heard from people across all ages, from all over the world, is that this book felt like a hug when one was needed. And what more can an author ask for than to get that kind of response? Regardless of why I set out to write this book, regardless of the intent or the story I wanted to tell, I think in the end it's going to be remembered as an escape for people when they needed it most.
Yeah, I think you've probably achieved that. Like I said, it came to me at a very good time. Where did the origins of this story come from? I would love to know what's working in that head of yours, and how.
So I've always, okay, so let me preface it with this. Do you guys know Edward Gorey and the Gashly Crumb Tinies? If
Oh,
you do
yes.
not know what Edward Gorey and the Gashly Crumb Tinies is it's the most beautiful, beautiful art. Edward Gorey was a beautiful artist and writer, and he illustrated some of the most gorgeously they're children's stories, but they have a very dark, twisted edge. And just the artwork behind it. There's one in particular, it's a print, and it's a headmaster of sorts standing in like a black cloak, and around him are various assorted different children's of various shapes and ages and sizes. And I think that I always knew I wanted to do with the idea of magical something, because I knew the idea that I wanted to go for was that the magical people, it would be just a code for otherness. It would just be a code for what marginalized people have felt all over the world and what we continue to feel. And at the same time, I wanted to remove one part of that. If you'll notice in this book, while there is institutionalized bigotry and there is communal bigotry in this book, there is no homophobia. And that was extraordinarily important to me, because I didn't want the queerness of this book to be a plot point. I wanted the queerness of this book to just be, because the more we do that, the more we see that in Catch a Story, the more people will just be like, oh, okay, just keep on going. Instead of, granted, don't get me wrong, the big coming out scenes and the tropes, and they're wonderful, and there are far greater authors than I who have written such things. But in telling this story, I wanted it to be about otherness as a whole, not just one specific thing. So the queerness was always going to be this quiet little back part that filtered through, and I think it turned out lovely with the way that it represented itself.
It really did. And I think that was one of the things I really especially wanted to ask you about, because I think so much of media out there, books in particular. I mean, I grew up in the 90s. There were no queer teen books.
Yep.
They just didn't exist. So much of what is put out there, and I think there are extraordinary efforts to create more queer lit, and create the books that show the different sides of our lives and show so much. But I think so much of what is out there is so issue focused, and that it's either the coming out story or the self-actualization or the family story or it's the response to that homophobia.
Right. And look, don't get me wrong. And I understand what you're saying too. There, as I said before, and I'm sure everyone here will agree, there is a necessary time and place for stories like that. Absolutely. Those are necessary. But the thing is, and what I always try to remind people with my writing is that coming out, the trope itself in fiction and the process itself for real people is very personal, it's very deep, and it can be very scary and cathartic all at the same time. But the thing is, life doesn't stop.
Yes.
When you come out, everyone you meet from the rest of your life is somebody that you'll potentially have to come out to. Queer people don't stop when they speak their truth. If they're able to do so, we continue on. And I think it's important to show that queer people, regardless of what we see in media, queer people aren't all white people with abs partying on the beach and doing all this other stuff. I'm 40, I just turned 40 years old. I want to see Linus is 40 years old. Arthur is 45. They find each other later on in life. And that's just the thing. With the coming out process, your life doesn't stop then. And love doesn't only happen to people in their teens or in their 20s. We need to see more stories about people finding their happiness in later on in life, in their 40s and their 50s. And, later on, I think that we sometimes think that love is for the youth, and that we forget that love is for everyone, no matter your age, and I love the idea of a fussy, middle-aged bureaucrat like Linus getting to be the hero of a fantasy story. How often do you get to see a fat queer man be the hero of a fantasy? You don't get to see that very often. And I love that we get to have that. Linus does have issues with his personal image. He has some internalized fat phobia. But what I love about him, because it's so subtle and gentle is that by the end, he's not even thinking about that anymore. He is thinking about how life is so much more than, as he says, a spare tire or hair on a pillow. It is, because there are some things that are beyond your control. And if they are not beyond your control, say his size, you know what? He's happy in his skin for the first time in his life. He's settled. He feels good about himself. And I just think that's so important to continue to show that kind of stuff, because you know what? Body positivity should also be a thing that happens for all ages. We should all be able to, it's not a thing that we should just be promoting for young people, even though it is beneficial for young people to see. It should be for everyone, because I think I don't want to speak for everybody. I think that no matter your age, you probably have some kind of issue. That's just how we do. That's how we are.
Yeah.
We're all full of issues. We just don't like to talk about them.
Well, I think that's what has connected to so many readers too. And like I said, your choice of creating representation in the way that you did in this book is really refreshing, because Linus is living his life.
Yep.
He's just
It's
living
not,
his life.
and there, I think it's like a one-line sentence that announces to the reader that he's queer. I think that was it. And it was like something like almost like a half forgotten detail just added in there. And that was the point. It's not supposed to be a shocking moment. It's not supposed to, have readers, even though there have been readers who clutch their pearls at such things that I can talk about a little bit later. But it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be just this moment like, oh, okay, his eyes are this color, his hair is this color, he's a little bit frumpy, he's middle-aged, he has a receding hairline, oh, and he's gay, and then all the rest. It's just how it is.
Yeah. And that, again, it's extremely refreshing.
Yeah, thank you.
That. I think I'm thinking of those, like, I mean, of course, stupid memes, which are all over the place, but like the gay agenda, wake up, be gay, have your coffee, go to work. Like, but that's it.
It's too tiring to do anything else. I'm exhausted all the time. Do you think that I would have more power to do anything else? Please.
And it's June.
Right.
And you're writing books all the time.
I'm writing, and I get to talk to lovely people all the time. And it's Gay Pride Month, where corporations remember that we exist. And it's so wonderful to see. I love it. I have so much fun with that. It's a joy to be pandered to.
We could talk about that another time. I want to know where your ideas for these amazing characters, these amazing children, came from, and were you snickering to yourself the entire time as you were writing them?
No, see, this is gonna make me sound like a jerk. I tend not to laugh at my own writing. But when I'm going back and reviewing something, or like through the editing process, and I get to a point where I think, oh man, this is going to make a reader cry, that's when I'll laugh. Oh yeah, look, because let's face it, fiction, I'm lying to you. I'm manipulating you to follow you, to have you come into the story with me, to tell you what I want to do. So yeah, I love humor. Humor is something that comes very easy to me, but I'm so much more interested in the other things where you could be laughing one moment, and then all of a sudden in the next paragraph, you don't even realize all of a sudden you've switched, and that laugh has become a hitching in your chest instead. I love that manipulation, as it were, but I don't know. The characters themselves, how it always starts for me is characters. I always tend to hear, I have that Edward Gorey poster above my desk, and I stare at it every now and then. I'll look at it, and I know that there's something there, but nothing will come. But as it happens, it's the characters that begin to speak to me first. And it should surprise no one who's read this book to know that the first person that started speaking to me in this book was, in fact, not Linus, but Lucy. Lucy, as readers will know, is the Antichrist. He's 6 years old, and he loves what he calls dead people music. I love dead people music in terms of Richie Valens, Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Santos. I mean, it's just my jam. I love all of that music. And what I love about music specifically is right now you could go online and listen to any song and stream any song you want, and it'll be produced within an inch of its life, crystal clear quality. You'll never hear any imperfections whatsoever. But when you put an old song on a record and you put that on a record player and listen to it, it has all the crackles and the hisses, and the people are singing, especially with these older songs, they sound like ghosts. And so I kept thinking about Lucy and dead people music, and who is Lucy and why is he talking to me? Lucy, Lucifer, oh my God. It kind of just exploded from there. And I knew going into it that in addition to Lucy, that there needed to be variations. Lucy was always going to be an extreme in that he was the Antichrist, because I wanted to explore the idea of nature versus nurture and what that would look like if a 6-year-old child has the name and the legacy and the parentage in that he is considered to be one of the scariest things that could ever happen to humanity, allegedly. And it's the fact that he's been prophesized and everybody is scared of this idea, this word Antichrist. But what would that look like if that word was in the body of a 6-year-old boy who, maybe he has some spiders in his brain, which is, it's a gentle way of saying a bit of darkness in him. He has some spiders in his brain. What would that look like, though, if a child like him was given a chance to just be that, a kid? What, instead of being told that you are this thing of evil, this thing that is going to lead to the destruction of society and the world and mankind, and what if that same person was given a chance to not do that? What if they were given a chance to just be normal and be a kid? And so they're expanded. Who would Lucy latch on to? He would latch on to somebody who shares his sense of humor. So that would have to be, what would she be? What could she do? Because I knew it was going to be a girl. What could she do? And then, as you're going out and walking around life, you'll see things that kind of pop into your story. And I happen to see a garden gnome, just a little statue. And I thought, holy crap, I could have this little 2-foot tall little girl with a beard. And it's just totally normal because that's how gnomes are. And everybody understands that and accepts that. And then it just kept building out and further from there. And I will say that my last creation was my favorite. And that is Chauncey. Chauncey is my favorite. Chauncey is a literal ball of sunshine. And I will die for that boy because he is just my absolute, think about it. When you're a kid, man, you didn't have a filter. Everything you said was weird and it was cool and it was okay to be weird, or at least it should have been okay to be weird. Kids should be allowed to be weird. They don't yet have the filter that comes with age. And by filter, I tend to mean cynicism. They don't have the cynicism that comes with age. And so they should be allowed to be weird and carve out spaces for themselves. But in relation to Chauncey, I remember being a kid, and when I got interested in something, I became hyper fixated on that. When I saw Indiana Jones, man, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Later on in life, I realized it was also because I wanted to be Indiana Jones' boyfriend. But that's another story that we can get to on my other podcast. Please love me, Harrison Ford. And but I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be that archaeologist. And then, of course, since I was a weird kid, a couple of years later, I saw Alien, which I was way too young for, but then I decided I wanted to be an astronaut archaeologist, completely missing the point of that film in its entirety. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that so bad. And I read everything I could about archaeology. I read everything I could about space. I read everything I could about planets and how there could be ancient civilizations on planets that we could one day find. And that's how it is for Chauncey, except he doesn't want to go to space. He doesn't want to go to dig up dinosaur bones. He wants to be a bellhop. And that is the thing that he wants more than anything in the world. And I think that if we remember our childhood, and when this book is read to kids, they understand that, because adults remember what that felt like to hyperfixate, and kids understand that because that's what they do. They find something they love and it becomes their entire world for however long.
How did you come up with Bellhop for him?
Because I knew that I was going to make him some sort of sea blob. So I wanted to make him want something that might be difficult, that some people might have a problem with, to see how he would react. And you know how he reacts? He doesn't care because he still wants to do it. Yes, he understands that he's different. And yes, he understands that he does not look like other people, but his goal, he wants to help people. He wants to carry their luggage. He wants to, cough and ask for a tip. And that's just what he does because he's a kid. So the reason that I wanted him to be the bellhop, because I wanted him to be in the public eye and to do something that some people might scoff at. Some people might say, oh, that's beneath me to do something like, no, it's not. And for him, it's a joy, a singular joy. And I think that he's going to grow up to be the best damn bellhop there ever was.
Absolutely. And we were talking earlier, and I think he's really among the only one of the kids who hasn't, at least not that we've seen or that I recall, has suffered any really major traumas.
Right. I think with Chauncey, they frankly just did not know what to do with him because there's nothing like him. So what do you do with an aberration? What do you do with an anomaly? You don't know what else it can do. So maybe you need to put it with children who also might be somebody that we need to hide away. Because what I think about a lot is the fear that this community has, that this government is pushing down on people, isn't just a fear of magical children or the magic community as a whole. It's a fear of what these people can do or what they think that these people will do. That's how they feed the fear, by propaganda, which unfortunately is not so far fantastical from our everyday life. And when I wrote the book back in 2018, beginning of 2018, I never would have thought that we'd be where we are now. I wrote it because in direct response because of the darkness I felt the world was headed towards. And, I don't know if we've recovered from that. I don't know if we will, and I know that can be hard for a lot of people, but I think that this world that we live in, unless we do something about it, it's just going to keep on going like it is.
Yeah. Well, I think having reminders of the good that love can do in the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, I absolutely love books about chosen family. And I think that, we were talking about this earlier, I'm a big Tales of the City fan, and
Mm-hmm.
Armistead Maupin's quote about logical family and
Yeah.
all of that. And I think of chosen family stories as being not entirely, but an essentially queer concept.
Okay. To me, it is entirely a queer concept. And look, I understand that, some people might take issue with that. But here's the thing. The idea of the found family trope, I get why it's popular. I get why people love to read that. Hell, I love to read that. I write it. Obviously, I care about it. But the thing is, though, I think that people need to be reminded that trope comes from a very real place, because so many queer people do not get to have the love and the acceptance that they deserve. I did not get that growing up. I don't have a relationship with the people who gave birth to me. My family is made up of my brother, my sister, and the rest of our family are people who are not related to me. That is my family. And that is the reality for many queer people across this country. Not all. There are some amazing, amazing parents out there who love and accept their kids like all parents should. I mean, that is a frank reality. This is your child. You brought them into the world. You made them. You raised them. You do not get to shove them away from you when they tell you their truth, when they tell you who they are. They are deserving of your love and acceptance, just like any other child out there in the world. And the found family aspect of that, again, is so much of our reality that, I think that sometimes we take that trope for granted, because I think that the reason I write the books that I do is because that is my reality. That is what I see. Yes, I understand that. No, I'm not the Antichrist, and no, I'm not. I can't turn into a were Pomeranian. But it is the idea that you find families where none should exist, because that's how we make them. We make our own.
Yeah. Teresa here says she 100% agrees with that, and that's why this book is so essential. We've actually quite a few comments here.
Oh, good.
Mary said Linus evolved so beautifully in this book, and the kids and Arthur helped him to find himself. It's amazing to see him transform. And also, I've never laughed and cried so easily back and forth in books before I read yours.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
I bet you do. One of the things we were talking about that was just sort of a question that we were kind of kicking back and forth was, did you have anything particular in mind geographically or time-wise with this book? Because it seems so. We
I'm
were
glad you
trying
guys
to
picked
figure out
up
the
on
time.
this. Yeah. So it's not meant to be set in any specific time. It's meant to be timeless.
Okay.
You know, there's mentions of computers in the book, but there are no televisions mentioned. There are no cell phones mentioned. There are the idea of this, the aesthetic I have in mind is very much like a 1950s type of culture, with probably, unfortunately, the racism, the misogyny, the bigotry that all goes along with it. But when I talk about the aesthetic, I mean the type of dress, how people look, how everything goes. And setting wise, we during the editing process, we debated back and forth whether we wanted to give this a location and whether it would be something that would benefit the story. And in the end, I said it wouldn't, because I wanted this book to feel like it could take place anywhere and anytime.
Yeah.
And yes, there is a distinctly British feel to it, because I read a lot of British fiction. I watch a lot of British television. And one of my favorite books growing up was Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. And I remember how that book made me feel. And I remember how Studio Ghibli movies make me feel when you see movies like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, and how they just have this quaint, English sensibility to it. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring to this book. It's a bit old fashioned, but it's meant to, again, to be able to take place anywhere and anywhen.
And that was sort of what we were talking about. So I think you definitely succeeded in that, because it's also so like vividly evocative. Like,
Yeah, I wanted this to feel like a painting almost.
Yeah.
What a big inspiration for the book was, as you could probably see, is The Wizard of Oz. And when you start at the very beginning, Linus is in a very gray, rainy, dark world. At the very beginning of The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is in a sepia-toned Kansas. And it's not until she actually crosses into Oz that the world bursts into Technicolor. And I know this is a movie that came out, in the 30s?
30s.
30s, yeah. 1930s. But I will say this, if you get the chance to see that movie on the big screen, do it. Because the moment, you've seen color movies all your life. Yes, I understand. But the moment still when Dorothy goes to Oz for the first time and the color blooms, it's still absolutely breathtaking. It is absolutely marvelous to see. And that's what I wanted for Linus. So when he gets to the near the village for the first time, we get the first hints of color. We get the green in the grass, we get blue slivers in the sky, we get the sand, you get the buildings, the pastel buildings, the bus station with the bright orange phone. And it's just all these hints of color. And it's not until he actually gets to the island the colorful blooms. And it's not because of the island itself, but the people.
Yeah. Well, you definitely succeeded in that. Megan says the aesthetics are familiar, but without being set in a particular place, that's part of the escape.
Yeah. So I grew up in Oregon, and I was born and raised in Oregon. And every summer we would go to a place called Seaside in Oregon. That was a very small coastal town. Now, when I say Oregon coast, yes, you're thinking, oh, it's the Pacific, so it's going to be warm. No, the Oregon coast, you go to the Oregon coast, not to go swimming, but to probably be cold and get very sandy at certain points. It's not a swimming type of area for the most part, but there's a place called Seaside that has this huge, big boardwalk that is just, it's a very tourist trappy. There's a tilt-a-whirls, there's elephant ears on sale, there's all the little shops with the beads and the shells and the fudge and all of that. And that was a big part of my childhood. So I translated that over. I just set it in a more tropical setting over for the house in the Cerulean Sea. And I wanted to give it a more vibrant setting instead of it just being under a doomy sky like at Seaside was all the time.
Yeah, we actually had we actually had a discussion earlier. One of our participants mentioned your frequent use of the word cerulean in a whole bunch of your books.
Mhm.
Is it a favorite word?
There's a story behind it. Unfortunately, that's not a story I share. I just
Okay.
know that it is for in the memory of a friend of mine.
Okay, you got it.
So anytime you see that word, and let me tell you this, that's something that I've done forever for many books. I did not come up with the title, The House in the Cerulean Sea. The original
Really?
title of the book was Don't You Wish You Were Here? And I imagined the cover being like a postcard and with the cursive script, Don't You Wish You
Yeah.
Here Were Here? But my publisher, as publishers are wont to do, wanted something that sounded more fantasy. And so I'm the worst, because I came up with, I was like, Don't You Wish You Were Here is a freaking great title. What are you talking about? You're out of your mind. I can't rename the book. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. So my editor was the one who came up with the idea for The House in the Cerulean Sea, because she said that it's the first thing that they will see on the cover. And the very last line in the book is that Linus thought to himself somewhere in a house in a cerulean sea. So it'll be kind of like a synchronicity. It's the first thing you see and the last thing you read.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So many of the authors I've spoken to say they don't even get any say in what's on the cover, what the title is, or what's on the cover. Or
So we can get to the cover too. That's a whole other thing. Because that's not the original cover for The House in the Cerulean Sea.
interesting.
But sometimes, my book that came out after this, Under the Whispering Door, that was originally called The Tremendous Death of Wallace Price. But my editor said, and she was absolutely 100% on the money in this book, is originally in the original draft of the novel, it was much more centered on Wallace, when it should have been centered on Wallace not coming in and sounding like some kind of white savior, because the other characters in the book were characters of color. And so we knocked Wallace down a few pegs. And not only that, she gave me the best editing advice I've ever received ever, which was to decentralize. Yes, Wallace is the main character, but other things in this tea shop have happened without him, so they can continue to happen without him. He can be an audience. He does not have to be involved. And that way, in changing the title, we took it away from it being just about Wallace Price and took it to about being the door where everybody goes at some point or another. But I will say that my book that comes out next year, which kind of concludes what I call my unofficial kindness trilogy, In the Lives of Puppets, that comes out next March, that was the title that they let me keep because they liked it.
Yeah.
So I said, hooray. So yes, you win some, you lose some. And frankly, these people have been in the business far longer than I have, and they're paid much more to make the big decisions. So, okay,
Yeah.
so go with it. Because you can either go with it or get mad at it. Why would you get mad at it? The House of the Cerulean Sea is a beautiful title.
It is. It is. Okay, so how do you stay so prolific? If you said this was your 25th book?
Yeah.
And when I emailed you first, you're like,
So
oh, I
funny.
have another one coming out right around that time.
Yeah,
then
the conclusion of my YA trilogy, Heatwave, comes out July 19th. Yeah. So I'm tired.
You're a busy
A lot.
guy.
I'm very busy. I'm tired. But look, I am so lucky to get to do what I do, man. Because how many people get to say really that they do what they love? I'm very fortunate in that regard. I get to do what I love most, more than anything in the world, and that's play with the voices in my head. Because frankly, if I didn't have an outlet for that, that's probably not a good idea. I have ADHD. So I have to be very focused on what I do. When I quit, oh man. So one day at the end of 2015, I went to my job where I worked at an insurance company whose lizard commercials you probably all know and hate. And at this place, I did what was known as the continuing unit. And in this cubicle hell where I lived for 10 years, my job was to, when you got into an extraordinarily horrible car accident where there may have been significant injuries or death or pending litigation, or you're getting sued, guess who you talked to on the phone at your insurance company? Hello, me. And I was the one that handled all your claims. So that meant I got to see everything when it came to that. So you can imagine how that could weigh on a soul after a while. And what sucked was I was really good at it. You know, what do you think of your life when you say, man, I'm so good at insurance? Yeah, all right, let's rock and roll. So one day in 2015, like towards the end, I went to go meet with my boss because that's what we had to do when you wanted to talk about your cases. You met with your boss. And as I was sitting down, he goes, okay, so I was reviewing this case. So what do you think we should do about this action? And I looked at him and I was thinking about, okay, we should probably have to call their attorney. But what I said was, I think I'm going to quit. And, and so my boss looks at me, he goes, what? I said, think I'm quitting. I'm quitting. I'm quitting. And I repeated that quite a few times until we all understood exactly what I was saying. And then I went home and had a panic attack. And then the next day I got to work. I think I knew that this was coming, that I wanted to do this because I had been saving or becoming a lot more frugal than I usually was. And I put in my month's notice. And when that month ended at the end of February 2016, I walked out of there for the last time on a Friday. And then Monday morning, I was sitting at my computer. And at that point on, I told myself that if I was going to do this, I had to do it right. Because if I failed, there's nobody to blame but myself. Everything will fall back on me because I'm my own boss. And that is the most terrifying thing that I could have ever done, especially as someone who is neurodiverse like myself. So I made a plan, I made a schedule, and I've stuck to that schedule for the last 6 years. I write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for about 4 hours every day. And then I go away from my work. I do other things that come with my job. You would be surprised at the 6 trillion emails that I get every single hour. And, but that's what I do 5 days a week. I write. I do not write on the weekends unless like I am in the middle right now of edits where I should have been a lot farther along than I am. But that's how I do it. I am as prolific as I am. I write as much as I do because I stick to it. But let's keep this in mind. If I write 500 words in that 4 hours, that's a good day. That's fine. If I write 5,000 words in that 4 hours, that's a good day because chances are that 4,500 of those 5,000 are going to suck and they're probably going to get cut anyways. And look, if there are days when I don't write, I used to be really hard on myself, but you know what? Life's too short to be mad at yourself because your brain is being stupid. So if I get to that thing called writer's block, and it sometimes happens, I don't try to push through it. I know now to just get up and go away for a little bit and come back to it, and it usually work itself out. If it doesn't, oh no, what am I going to do? Pick one of the other 3 trillion stories that I have in my head that I'll never be able to write in a lifetime? I don't, I love this more than anything, but I do not let it control me.
That's good. Do you work on several stories at the same time? Or yeah.
No, that total shift would be a nightmare. I can't even edit and write at the same time. Like right now, I'm editing a book and I was 2 chapters away from finishing another book. And I was like, no, why are you doing this? So now for the last month, that book has sat unfinished, the last 2 chapters, because I've been having to do the edits. I can't focus on more than one thing at a time when it comes to my work because, my mind would get too scattered.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like the people who say they can read more than one book at a time. Who are you? Who are you? How can you do that?
I can read one and listen to one.
Oh, no. How do you do that?
I'm a librarian. I have to.
That's true. That's absolutely true. No, that makes sense. You win that round. You win that round, librarian.
But beyond that, no.
No,
not at all.
I can't do that either. But I see people all the time saying, yeah, I'm reading like 3 books right now. I'm like, you're doing what now? How can you focus? I would just get everything mixed up, which is how it would be.
Yeah. One of our participants here I know is constantly reading many things at once.
That takes a level of control.
And I don't know how she does it. And we're very dear friends.
Yeah.
But
like multitasking, I try, but there's varied levels of success.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, are you one of those writers that writes chronologically? It's so interesting because I feel like everybody I talk to has like this is what I do, and this is how and it's totally different from everybody else.
Oh
So
yeah, chronologically, I cannot write out of order. And you know what I do, because I want to give myself little rewards. It's just how I make it fun for myself. Is if there's a scene that I really want to write so bad, and because I know it's going to be because I outline everything first. I don't consider it in stone. It's more of a roadmap as to how I can go if I want to. But if there's a scene I know I want to write, I don't let myself write it. I wait until I get there so I can have the satisfaction of getting there and saying, God, yes, this works. This works still. This is awesome. Because I won't write the story for that scene. But if it still fits when I get there, I'm like, yes, this is so cool. And then I get to do it. So it's like a little treat for myself.
oh, that's so great. I have hogged a lot of this conversation. Does anybody have questions for TJ?
I would ask, what do you do if you get writer's block?
I do walk away. Thankfully, this is going to sound, it's going to make me sound so condescending. I swear it's not, I promise. So the worst writer block I ever had was a book called Wolf Song. And it was a book I wrote years ago that's going to be republished. Tor UK are republishing this whole series. It's going to be very cool. But I came to a point where I was just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. It's not going like I thought it would. So, and I just couldn't figure out a way around it for days. I couldn't figure out a way around this block. So what did I do? I wrote another book. I put that one aside. And for the next 4 months, I just wrote another book. And then I came back to it. And I was like, oh, I see where I went wrong. Oh, okay. Then I wrote that book. And so the publisher at the time was like, you're sending too many books. I was like, oh, well,
Wait,
what can you do?
You can write a book in 4 months?
I wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea in 3.
Wow. So
I
you're
wrote
just full of stories.
Under the Whispering Door, and that took 8 months because I did not work on it the same amount because it was entirely different, more difficult subject matter. In the Lives of Puppets is a huge book. It's huge. It's probably, I don't want to say twice the length. That's ridiculous. It's a good size, bigger than House in the Cerulean Sea. That took me 4 months to write.
Wow.
Because see, when I get consumed by a book, at the very beginning, I will work slowly. But when I get in a good role, when I feel the rhythm, when I feel the vibes, when I'm enmeshed into a story, I can go like you wouldn't believe. And not only that, but to help me stay in the world of the story, with each book I write, I create playlists that are sometimes hundreds of songs long. So when I'm out in the world, going out or walking my dog or doing anything, I'm listening to that playlist. So I stay in the world. So I'm continually thinking about it when I'm not working on it. So yeah, I just, when I get going on a good story, I go full bore.
Wow. That's really impressive.
It's also very exhausting.
I'm sure.
It is. So, but
And then
imagine doing that though. And then, working 60 hours a week on top of that. That's a reality for 99% of authors. That is the reality. Again, I'm so fortunate that I get to do what I do and how I do it. But the reality is, to get here, I worked my butt off. I was working 60 hours a week at the insurance job and then coming home and writing until 1 o'clock in the morning and then doing it again all over the next day, getting up at 5 and going to work.
Yeah.
And but I know it's probably not healthy to say, but when you want something bad enough, you do what you can to achieve it, and you have to make sacrifices sometimes. And I did, but, I think that in the end, I'm happy with where I am and I'm at peace with what I've done to get where I am.
That's incredible. That's great. It's so good to hear that. And it's nice that you were able to have the time to do it. I, not to talk much about other authors, but I reached out to Lynn, who just published a book a few months ago, and said, hey, would you be interested? And she got back to me and she's like, so I'm finishing up medical school right now and I'm going into rotations. I'm like, do you sleep? Like, do you eat?
Oh, yeah.
How do you have this time? It's crazy.
I was on oh my God, I'm going to forget her name. And this is going to really make me mad. I was on a panel last year with an author, debut author, who was also a a doctor who is also a professor who
Is it
also
Sayantani Dasgupta?
no
No.
and she also ran this nonprofit to
Oh my
help
God.
underprivileged communities get more books. And I was just like sitting there, like, and I was on the panel with her, and I was just sitting there listening to her in awe. And I was just thinking, man, what did I do yesterday? Oh yeah, I wrote until noon, and then I chased my dog around the yard for an hour. And then I went back inside and then laid on the floor with my dog.
I mean, that sounds like a
there are
pretty
some people who are
fabulous
going out
day.
there who can write books and then change the world on top of that. I'm just like, I'm just going to write my happy gaze. It's totally fine.
Hey man, you're doing a service.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think you should diminish that at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I know you probably get asked this a fair amount. So you seem to leave the door open at the end of this book.
Uh-oh, you were going into this territory. All right.
Go
ahead.
I was just like, come on, now I don't want to leave it yet.
I'm going to pretend I don't know what you're going to ask. Hold on. Okay, now interesting.
Okay,
what was
TJ.
the question? Left the door open? Mm-hmm. What was this?
Are you
Yes. What's going on?
Are you thinking about revisiting this world at all? You probably hate me right now.
No, because you're absolutely correct. I do get asked this question and another question about adaptations are questions.
Oh no, I wasn't going to
get
ask you
all
that
the
one.
time. Yes.
I wasn't going to ask
So
you
what
that
I will say is this to answer both. I can neither confirm nor deny that anything is in progress, wink, and that there will be news coming in the future, wink, and that maybe one day we'll be able to have a discussion about what that news is exactly, wink, wink, wink. So just keep in mind that I have not said anything here that could get me in trouble with my publisher or my agent, wink, 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 wink.
Well, I
So
will
there you
just
go.
say to you that I really hope sometime I can revisit this world.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
It would be really
if
great.
That was something that could happen at some point in the future. Say if that was even the book I was working on that I didn't finish. Those last two chapters. What if that was the case? I don't know. So,
well,
I'll say this. I will say
all
this, that many times when I finish a book, I know it's over because the characters go away. These characters don't go away.
Yes.
And there's a new character added to their voice, and his name is David. And I want to see what he is like.
We all know about
the Yeti boy.
The existence of David. So
yes.
So, what else? We're gonna run out of time. I'm gonna get kicked out of the library very soon. So if anybody,
some people were curious about whether or not you had any say into the readers of your audiobooks, because they really enjoyed the audio version.
So I was in LA in April, and that was the very first time that I was able to go meet the wonderful man that is Daniel Henning, the narrator for this book. I typically get to have a say on who narrates my books. And if you've followed my career for any length of time, you'll know that Kurt Graves has done narration for the Green Creek series. He also did the narration for Under the Whispering Door. You have Michael Leslie, who has been a narrator of mine for many years, who I brought up with me for my young adult series, The Extraordinaries at Tortine. He does the audio for those. The House in the Cerulean Sea was my first book with this new publisher. So I didn't know what I could ask for. I didn't know if I had the right to say anything, because on the indies, in the queer indie scene, let's say that I was a medium-sized fish in a small pond. Now I was a minnow in the ocean, but it's not our oceans. It's probably just on a planet twice the size of ours, just made of oceans. That's what I was at that point in time. So I didn't know if I could be like, excuse me, I don't know if you know who I am, but I have a list of narrators I would prefer to work with, And so all of a sudden, Drew Kilman, who is my producer at Macmillan Audio, emailed me and he says, look, I have this audio that I want you to listen to. His name is Daniel. He's a theater person. And I said, oh, theater. Okay. And so I listened to the audition, and within a minute, I knew it was him. Absolutely. 100%. He is those voices. whenever I am with these characters, I think of them in the voices that he gave them. And I get to honestly say this, and it's wonderful. Daniel Henning is genuinely one of the most beautiful, humble, and lovely people I have ever met in my entire life. When I got to go out to dinner with him in where he lives in Silver Lake, California, he took me on a history of where queer pride was founded in the United States in the 70s. And so we were able to go see our history, because I'm always talking, when I give talks, I talk about how important it is for younger queer people to know their history and where they came from and who came before them that gives them that helped them get the rights that they have today. And Daniel taught me more than I knew, because, while I sometimes can consider myself an elder gay, he has a good 20 years on me. So he is a true elder gay. And so just that I got to learn from him is just, you guys, if you thought Daniel Henning was wonderful in that book, let me just tell you, he is just as wonderful in person. He is just the most genuine man I have ever met in my entire life. And I'm so fortunate that we got him on this book.
Oh my God. He did I listened to the book.
Mhm.
He did such an incredible job.
Isn't his Chauncey voice so
His
good?
Chauncey voice is probably my favorite of his voices.
I love it so much. I did a one book, one community event in Connecticut where the library had their community read the book, and we went into an auditorium, and he recorded a voiceover as the characters to introducing the panel. And I knew that had happened because they asked permission to do that, but I totally slipped out of my mind until I walked into the theater and heard him talking in the voices of the characters introducing the show. And I was like, oh my God, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, incredible. And I feel like, because I listened to the book rather than read it, now I can't separate it.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm glad you said it. Like, well, I mean, look, there's this argument that goes around every now and then. It's so ridiculous that
I know
some
which
people say
argument you're
that
gonna talk about.
that listening to audio doesn't count as reading. That is the stupidest thing in the world. If the author of the book you are listening to says that counts as reading, guess what? That counts as reading. And I first and foremost, I think that argument is ableist at the very least.
Yes.
But the fact that we can have translated worlds like that, like, yes, I love the printed word, but I honestly don't feel like the story belongs to me anymore because Daniel made it his own. And I think that for me is the preferred way.
Yeah. Well, that's great to know, because I'm going to recommend it very widely.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah, no, totally recommend the because what I love is the one thing, one thing I did not expect that has been an interesting byproduct of this entire journey with this book is I've somehow found myself being labeled a children's author, which is not something that I ever expected to be labeled. But when I get to hear that, from parents who are reading this book with their kid or listening, I get so many emails from families who took this book on a road trip when they're in their car, when they're listening to it. And, how, their kids enjoyed it as much as the parents did. And, if that makes me a children's author, then so be it.
I would never categorize it as a children's book, but do I want to make
people,
my 8-year-old niece?
It's so funny. When this book came out, I remember one of the trade reviews talking about how much they liked the book, but they ended the review with the question, but I can't tell you who this book is for. And I thought that was the weirdest thing, because this book is for everyone. Yeah. That's all it is. It's that simple. People try to categorize it as children's literature or YA, even though the main character is a 40-year-old man. People try to, characterize it as romantic fantasy, which in a way, I guess it could be that. But I want, like this book is trying to say, I want this book to eschew labels. I want it to be something that is universal and not needing to be relegated into neat little boxes for whatever satisfaction they may bring. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think that trying to categorize this book, especially when people are trying to relegate it to, unfortunately, there is a bit of an ominous label that comes, oh, well, this is children's literature, or this is young adult literature, which means that it cannot be sophisticated or worldly, right. Or it's not. It's the same argument that you hear with people when they talk about romance not being literature, even though it is the most successful genre in literature by far, bar none. And what I hate one thing that I don't like when I hear from readers is that they talk about books like The House in the Cerulean Sea, or books that make them happy as their guilty pleasure. Why do you have to feel guilt about it? Do not feel guilt about it. Read what makes you happy. Read what you want. Who cares? Well, and if there are people who are judging you for what you read, screw them. I got made fun of by my parents for how much I loved to read when I was a kid. And you know what I did? I kept their name of Klune and I made it super gay. They are homophobic people. And guess what? The first thing, that name that you come up when you look up Klune is me. I got my revenge that way. And you know what? That's what I want. I want happiness. I want acceptance. And I want people to be able to read what they want without feeling guilt over it or being judged by others.
Yeah, that's an incredible.
I get very
Beautiful.
mad.
Yeah,
people,
but no, but
you know,
that's the kind of anger that we need in the world.
well, it's the same. I get
And
mad on your behalf when I'm hearing all these people freaking talking about what books kids should or should not be able to read.
oh
Because if there's
man,
one thing that I have learned in my life is that you should not tell teachers or librarians what your kids can or cannot read. Because if you do, your life is forfeit. You know, teachers and librarians are extraordinarily protective of their children, as they should be. And trying to take books that matter most from them is just, I can't believe that we're living in a day and age when Toni Morrison's Beloved is a book that people are trying to get banned from libraries. That's what is that?
yeah, yes, and oh my God, we could go on for another hour about that
Yep.
easily, but and I'm in the middle of a discussion in my own community.
In my
about
community where I
against-
live in Spotsylvania in Northern Virginia, the school board went on record during a school board meeting. One of the members said that they should consider bringing back book burning. So
This is the world that we're living in right now, and it seems like they're coming for the queers primarily. So
well, that's what. So they're coming for Black authors who write about the Black experience, and they're coming for queer authors who write about the queer experience. But here's the thing: they talk about wanting to save the children. Okay, first and foremost, if you don't know, that came from the 70s, from a woman named Anita Bryant, who tried to, she was a former beauty queen who had some songs that she sang in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. She decided that she hated homosexuals. And so she started the Save Our Children campaign, where she said that teachers or homosexuals had infiltrated teaching positions and in books were indoctrinating children to be homosexuals. Can you guess what that sounds like? Here we are 50 years later having the same discussions.
I mean, we could even go back to, we could go back to McCarthyism. We could go back to the visual art world in the 50s.
Here's the thing.
We could do this forever.
Books don't make people gay.
Right.
This is how it is. This is how it is. Gay people are just born to be amazing. That's just how it works. It's how it works. We are blessed into the world.
I bought your book with my own teaching money. I bought 20 copies, and I am happy to say over 200 kids at my school read it this year.
Okay, so I thought I'd make it all the way to the end without being someone trying to make me cry. But now you just tried to make me cry. That is lovely.
And we pass it around like candy at school. And I'm the guidance counselor, and they bring in the copy, and they're like, I know I have to take good care of your books or you'll get mad. And we just keep passing around the same copy.
Well, thank you for that. That is such a wonderful thing to hear. I love that. I love that we get to share that. And, I just protect the kids, you got to protect the kids. You have to protect the kids because that's who is going to change the world one day. Yeah. And we just need to allow them to be their weird and wonderful selves.
And we have to give them places where they can see themselves.
Yeah, like what I just don't understand. That's what the whole House in the Cerulean Sea is about. It's about allowing a place for children to find out who they want to be and who they are, in a place free of judgment and in a place free of trauma and pain. And that's what I feel I wish schools could be. And I hope that they are for many students, but I know that things can be scary right now. Oh, well, the hearse was gone away. She's probably getting kicked out of the library. That's cool. You guys can see my awesome lightsabers back here. I turn those on just because I want them to make me look cool. And I think that they really do. Watch. Yeah, that was pretty cool. You're welcome.
You're beautifully framed right in this.
Thank you. You know what's funny though is my desk is right here, so I kind of have to sit at an angle a little bit just so you guys can see how cool I am.
I am so sorry to interrupt. But my coworkers are ready to lock me in.
No, well, thank you.
And I
all
would
for letting
love,
me come
I
here.
could stay here talking with you all night. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for writing such like amazing, loving books. And, you know, this has really been really great. And like I said, this came to me at a time when I really needed it. So
Well, thank you all so much. It's lovely to be able to talk to people about stories. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So remember, I never said anything about the future of this. Wait, but I'll give you guys a story real quick to wrap this up.
please.
I got an email last year from an 89-year-old woman who had read The House in the Cerulean Sea. She had a bone to pick with me. She was very upset because she was religious and she felt my inclusion of the Antichrist in this book was a wrong thing to do. And she said that even though she came to like the character of Lucifer, she felt that that would not be beneficial for children to read about somebody like the Antichrist. But she ended the letter by saying this, "But I did not mind the homosexuals." And that was the end. And so what I tell myself is that, okay, maybe this woman, when she picked up this book, had no idea what she was getting into. And you know what? Maybe she was really hardcore homophobic. Maybe she was just like, I hate gay people, rah, 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 Jesus Christ. And maybe she read this book and thought, okay, maybe they aren't so bad. Or maybe she just didn't mind the homosexuals and that's all that matters. The thing is this, I love people, even when they chew me out for putting characters like the Antichrist in, because you know what? They did not mind the homosexuals.
That's so great. Thank you, TJ, so much. This has been so wonderful. And after one of your many other books comes out, maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, trust me, I'm going to be writing until my hands fall off. It's pretty
I'm sure
good.
you will be.
Thank you guys so
you.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.